Dear friend Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee and the next governor of the state of Florida. All right, y'all give it up a little bit. Lumen is hyping us up like we're about to go into a wrestling match. I want to also thank, obviously, Grandmaster Walter Gully. Brother Gully, when we met and you said you wanted to bring me over and introduce me to Pensacola, I didn't know you meant everybody. Are these all the Democrats here, or thank you, Georgia and Alabama, but you're part of Florida. And not only are you a part of this state, you're an important part of this state. And anybody who's wanting to be governor needs to make their way through here, right? Because if you want to be the governor of Florida and you get elected, you're going to be the governor for all of Florida, right? Not just the ones that voted for you, not just the folks you overcame. It is everybody who calls this state home, who lives within the length and the breadth of the state of Florida. And it's important that a governor knows what inspires people and what concerns people, what their fears, but also what their aspirations are. And it's my intention to try to get a better sense of that all over this state, including here. And so I want to thank y'all for taking time on a school night, as they say, to spend some time with us exchanging. And I realize that part of tonight is also about me being able to answer what your questions are. Quite frankly, I want to be unapologetic about my agenda. I want you to leave this evening having your questions answered and feeling like you can be an unapologetic advocate for what we're trying to do, an unapologetic supporter of us winning this race for governor. That's my intention. That is my intention. I also want to thank the Escambia County DEC. Y'all see the blue shirts that are here. I appreciate them being here. Evelyn, Madam President, I want to make sure that if there's anybody who wants to get more involved in the local party, that you've got a party organization here that you can engage in. But whatever you do, know that this is a contact sport. And it's going to require all of us to be on the front lines of the change that we want to see. We can't sit back and wait on it. One of the mistakes that we made, I believe, when we sent Barack Obama to Washington, D.C., is we said, we elected him, now go and do great things. And the other side was intent on making him as least successful as he could be. And they stood in the way, and they obstructed, and they kept him from being able to deliver on the fullness of the agenda that he ran on. Well, listen, when we win this race for governor, we all going to Tallahassee, right? We all going to Tallahassee. And I don't just mean physically. Y'all invited to inauguration and the parties and stuff, but what I really mean is our issues, what we care about, what we're concerned about. And I believe that every one of you probably has concerns that are first and foremost right here in your own community, right? We haven't seen the treasure and the resources that we need to flow this way. And that requires having a passionate and committed advocate on behalf of the people of this area. Now, while I'm the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, and I'm proud to be it, right? I want you to know that I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I grew up in an area called Richmond Heights. It's known as the bottom. It's known as the bottom because it's literally the bottom of the state. I mean, you could fall off. But it's also known, as the bottom in some ways because where I grew up, and we grew up in a mixed neighborhood. I mean, it was probably one of the rare cases where you could have the school principal and the school teacher and the janitor all within the same area. I remember that. It's also the kind of place where you could get 4 whoopings when you messed up before you got on to get the real whooping. I'm not advocating whoopings, I'm just saying. I just got to reflect my truth. We got them. I tried to make them rare and few in between, but it happened. Growing up, my mother was a school bus driver and my daddy was a construction worker. And when there was no construction work to be done, you might find my daddy on a corner selling fruits or vegetables. Or my mother, when Florida got rid of summer school, she worked in a dry cleaner. She was a presser. Boy, would she press those clothes. I used to joke I had the sharpest crease of anybody around. My jeans had creases in them. Gentlemen, it's not popular to have jeans with creases anymore, and it wasn't then, but we had them. I say that all to say that my mother and father are two of the hardest working people that I know. Still to this day, two of the hardest working people that I know. I'm one of 7 kids, number 5 of 7, all boys and 1 girl, my baby sister. And I'm the first of the 7 to have graduated from high school and the first to graduate from college. You can't tell me and my family that we don't know what it means to see intergenerational poverty interrupted at the hands of a good public education, right? Which is why I'm such a strong advocate for our education system. Now, I had the blessing of being raised and going through the public system down in Miami and then getting to Gainesville and graduating high school there and then ending up in Tallahassee where I attended the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Shout out to FAMU. Got a couple of rattlers in the house. Well, I have to admit in the presence of these rattlers that FAMU was not my first choice. My first choice for college was this little known school called Hillman. Now Hillman got popularized in this show called A Different World. And because I didn't have the example of folks going to college in my household, Hillman was my North Star. I knew I was going to Hillman. And I prepared, I went to school, I studied hard, and when it came time to make application, you know, I looked for Hillman on the certificate to send my SAT scores. And then I learned that Hillman was not a real school. It broke my heart, but I found FAMU, and I've been better for it. But I swear to God, I thought it was gonna be Jaleesa and Wayne and Whitney Gilbert and all those others, but it's okay. I married my Whitney Gilbert. Her name is RJ Gillum. And today we have 3 kids that we're working hard to raise. And I'll tell you, there's nothing that grounds you in public policy like when you think about what your kids are going to inherit. Nothing. I mean, I've cared about the same things that I advocated and I'll speak about today for as long as I can remember. Now, the curvatures have changed over the years, but it has never been, the gravity of it has never been stronger than it is right now when I think about the kind of community and the kind of state I want to leave for my children. And I have to imagine if you got kids or grandkids, you also got to be thinking about what are my kids and my grandbabies going to have? Which is why it's so important that we start to lean into some of these issues and challenges that are confronting our state more earnestly than we ever have before. When it comes to our public education system, yes, we ought to pay teachers what they're worth, which is why I proposed a $50,000 starting salary for teachers. Because Florida, and by the way, not only did I propose it, I also proposed a way to pay for it, right? You can't throw these things out there without a plan for how it is that we pay for it. Teaching used to be an honorable middle-class profession. And now we got teachers moonlighting in the evening as retail and shop workers because they carry on enough to take care of themselves and their families. Florida ranks in the bottom 10% when it comes to starting salaries for teachers. We're 37th in quality of education in comparison to the other 50. 40% of our kids are starting kindergarten not ready to learn. That same percent, by the time they get to the 3rd grade, are not on grade level reading. The 3rd largest state in all of America. And we know what kind of predictions start getting made based off the literacy rates. Y'all, we need a change. We need a change in this state, and we need a governor who knows what it means to not only try to survive in this state, but what it means to thrive in this state. Everybody wants to remind me of all the money we don't have in this race. But you know what? We got people. We got people. And the way we're going to run and win this race are by bringing people out, by bringing people to the polls. And we've been lacking of that. Democrats have lost the race for governor in this state the last 4 cycles. The last 2 cycles, we've lost by less than 1 point. Fewer than 70,000 voters have been the difference between the winner and the loser. But I want to take it a layer further. Fewer than 70,000 voters have been the difference between whether or not we create schools where we give every child, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what their mama or their daddy did or what side of the track they grew up on, that they got an opportunity to learn. 70,000 votes fewer have been the difference between teachers being paid with their worth and being compared to evil, and our kids being told that they attend failure factories. Fewer than 70,000 votes have been the difference between whether or not we would expand Medicaid for 1.5 million of the most medically needy people or not. That's been the difference. It's been the difference between whether or not we're going to build high-speed rail across some of the most populated and fastest-growing areas of this state. When Barack Obama tried to send us $1.3 billion, the governor said, no, thank you. We don't take Obama's stimulus money. Think of the number of jobs that could have been created. The folks that could have gone to work, people like my daddy, but architects and engineers, construction workers, and we could have built 21st century transportation for the state of Florida. It's been the difference between a governor who says he's not a scientist, and therefore he can't say whether or not global warming and climate change is real. Never mind on Miami-Dade and Miami Beach, they're closing down streets due to high tide and natural occurrence. That's been the difference. And so we can't just throw these elections away as elections we lose and we win, because they show up in people's everyday lived experiences, in their everyday lives, in a state where 46% of the people say that they cannot make ends meet. They're working. In many cases, many of them working harder than ever and can't pull down enough money to take care of their bills, their monthly obligations. I have to tell you, I know what it was like. I watched my mother and my daddy trade between which bills they could pay and which they had to delay from month to month. Not because they weren't working, and not because they weren't working hard, but because at different points the system did not work for them. Which is why I've been an advocate of a livable wage in this state, right? That we pay people the wage that they can live on. Right? I've also been an advocate for making sure that when folks have committed a crime and they've done the time and they return to our society, that we get them their rights to vote back. 1.7 million people. 1.7 million. 1.7 million in this state. The good news is, y'all, we've collected enough signatures that on the November ballot, you're going to have an opportunity to vote. And if 60% of us agree, we will automatically restore rights to 1 million people. To 1 million people in this state. Some of you all may be familiar with the story of the Maasai. The Maasai are an East African tribe, and they were, over the course of history, known for demonstrating excellence in all things. Great hunters and gatherers, great and fierce warriors, great families. And they were known, and are known, over the arc of history as being a very rich community in a lot of senses, but there was one that struck me, and that is in the way that they greet each other. Whether you're a man coming upon another man or a family, a woman coming upon another woman or a family, they exchange the same greeting. And that greeting simply and eloquently is, and how are the children? And how are the children? And how are the children? Because they are a community that recognizes that how good we are and how good society is measured by how good the kids are set up. Wouldn't it be something if we had a governor who measured the well-being of this state by answering the question that the children are well? Wouldn't that be a notion? Well, unfortunately, in our state, we have a government that for 20 years in this state, under Republican control, have done everything that they can to put their foot on the necks of working people, right? That have done everything that they can to turn the public education system over to for-profit making institutions, right? This thing about not funding the public education system and this addiction to high-stakes testing, don't get it confused. These folks don't believe in the public system, right? They don't, and there's no way that you can convince me otherwise, because you can't believe in a system that you starve. You can't believe in a system where you degrade teaching professionals. You can't believe in a system where you call our kids and their institutions failure factories. That's not belief in it. The way you believe in it is you resource it. You pay teachers what they're worth. You make sure that our kids and their needs are met, and that when they show up in the classroom, they are ready to learn. Right? That's how you show your support and affection and encouragement for a system. That's not what's happening in this state. And y'all, we deserve a governor who's trying to put us on the right track. Not the wrong track, but the right track. All of our kids. All of our kids. All of our kids. Listen, we have an opportunity this August 28th, to, I believe, elect a Democrat who has the ability to motivate and to move the very voters that we need to move to the polls if we want to win. For these last several elections, we've lost, and I think part of our loss has been rooted in the fact that we've been afraid to run as who we are. We've been afraid to tell people what we believe. In every part of this state, by the way. I'm a fierce fighter for the things that I believe in. I'm proud to be the mayor of the city that is the fastest growing economy in the state of Florida per capita, the 17th fastest growing economy in the country per capita. I'm pleased to be the mayor of a city where our crime rate in my city is the lowest it's been since 2013. I'm pleased to be the mayor of a city that has been voted an All-America city. I'm extremely proud to be a mayor of the city that competed for and won the tech hire designation during the Obama administration for the work that we're doing to train this generation of workers for the technology-related jobs that exist today. Y'all, we have a skills gap in this country, right? A skills gap. And because in the high school system we're again addicted to high-stakes testing, we're not equipping our kids with skills that they can monetize, go to work, get a job, earn a wage, and take care of their families. If you're not on a college-bound track, when I was growing up in this state and going through our public education system, we had woodwork, shop, mechanical, electrical, technical, all those kinds of programs, right? And now we shame people for that work. Well, I had a plumber at my house a couple of weeks ago. He was there for less than an hour and walked away with $200 good out of my pocket. Running late to the next appointment. These are good jobs that pay good wages. And in the third largest state in all America, we don't have the opportunity to waste any of our talent. We got to put everybody to work. We got to make sure that you got the skills you need to walk out of your house, go to work, and have a job where you have a job with dignity. And what would I mean by dignity? It pays you a wage where you can take a vacation maybe once a year. You get health care coverage so that you're not accessing the emergency room for maintenance and care. It's the most expensive and least efficient. And even those of us with health care, we ought to be concerned about that. Why? Because it gets passed along through our premiums. Right? When they're increasing year over year. When the governor refused to extend Medicaid to 1.5 million people, we all ought to be upset about that. Why? One, because what loving and caring adult deliberately tries to take health care from people. Where do they do that? In Florida, under Rick Scott, right? But we should also be offended, y'all, because there was $6 billion that would have come into this state from the federal government that we never bought here. We got a nursing shortage in the state of Florida. We have a teaching shortage in the state of Florida. We have a problem recruiting the kind of industry and jobs to this state because they're afraid they can't get the talent if they come to the state of Florida. We got brain drain, some of our best talent fleeing this place. But you know what? We got an opportunity to change that in November, y'all. If we decide that we're angry enough and excited enough and hopeful enough to not only register but to turn out and vote, this is our state. There are more of us than there are of them. And what do I mean by them? I mean those who are on the other side of this agenda that we're talking about. Those who would prefer to take us back 50 years rather than forward. There are more of us than there are of them. But nobody's going to give us anything. We have to show up, and we got to show out. And if we do that, there will be a blue wave across the state of Florida, and we'll set ourselves up for a blue wave in 2020 when we splash you-know-who out of the White House. Right? I don't mean to make it about him, right? I don't mean to make it about him, right? But unfortunately, we know that the man who occupies the White House is uniquely unqualified for the position that he has. We know that. But the truth is, the way that we're going to win in Florida is by making sure that Florida voters know that they have a stake on the line. Right? And all over this state, you have people whose kids are opioid addicted. You've got parents who are working multiple jobs to make ends meet because they can't do it with their one. You got kids who are being pushed out of the public education system and onto the school-to-prison pipeline because they're not cutting the mustard. You got teachers who are fleeing our system because we've disincentivized public education in this state. You've got an unforgiving criminal justice system that tells people that you should be able to pull yourself up by the bootstrap, and then they erect every barrier to keep you from being able to do just that. Right? And whether you're in rural or red part of Florida or blue part of Florida, if that's your experience, you are as frustrated as the similarly situated person in urban Florida. Right? And they need to hear from us. And they need to know that we care. And they also need to know that we have a plan to make this state work for them again. Right? I want you to know that if you make me your nominee, I'm going to be a fighter. And I believe in the right fights. Not gratuitous fights. I believe in the right fights. I believe our kids are worth a fight. I believe working people are worth a fight. I believe our healthcare system and making sure that we treat healthcare like a right and not a privilege is worth a fight. I also believe it's worth a fight that when we send our kids off to school and we send our families into churches, that we don't have to worry about them having their lives snuffed out because the wrong person got access to a gun that should have been a gun and a weapon of war and not on our city streets. Right? And we got to be willing to defend that and to fight for that every single place that we go. So y'all, my ask is simple. My mom and daddy told me to only ask for one thing. And it's the same one thing that I asked the voters for when I was elected at the age of 23 as the youngest person in Tallahassee's history to serve on the city commission. It's one thing. All I've ever asked for in life is an opportunity, is a chance. Is a chance. I'm the most qualified candidate competing in this Democratic primary. But that's not my highest recommender. That ain't my highest recommender. But it's important you be credentialed. It's important you be ready. It's important that you be prepared because on day one, we got 20 years that we've got to pull off the scales of the eyes of the state of Florida. And it requires a governor who's ready on day one. I'll be that governor on day one. But I will tell you my highest recommender for this office is that I don't have to read in a briefing manual. I don't have to have anybody write me a speech to tell me what it means to live and try to survive in this state, but also what it means to thrive in the state of Florida. And I don't believe you should have to come from a famous family or be able to stroke your own check to be governor of the state of Florida. I believe you can come from Richmond Heights with a mother who drove buses and a daddy who built houses and buildings, who only had hope and ambition for their kids and did everything that they could to make their kids ready for it. I believe that you can have that kind of experience and be able to serve this state. But it's not enough for me to believe by myself. Y'all have to believe that it's possible. Y'all have to believe that it's possible. And the way that we make it possible, you all, is on August 28th and in the 30 whatever days leading up, make sure you are registered. Make sure you're able to turn some voters out. And make sure that you're able to get there yourself and deliver this election. The stakes are too high to be losing. They're too high, right? Not because of the candidate who loses. Every one of them who have lost are doing well today. They all right. I can tell you who isn't all right. Right? Those are the ones that I'm concerned about. And so the stakes are high in this race. I'm not on a fool's errand. I got 3 kids and a wife at home. I don't have time for fool's errands. My wife will remind you if you didn't know. Right? She on my case every day. Now remind me again. Yes, ma'am. We're going to win. Right? But we're not on a fool's errand. We're running because it's possible. We're running because I know that what we've got to have is a candidate who can move our voters out. We lost by 1 point. Fewer than 70,000 votes in a state of 20 million people. And I believe we can win again. And I'll end here. Because my mother and father would have to get up so early in the morning to head off to work, they load us all in the car. I don't know if we had car seats and stuff, y'all. But they load us, probably not, you're right. They would load us all in a car and drive us over to my grandma and my granddaddy's house. And my grandmother and grandfather would let us sleep a little bit longer before they would get us up and get us ready for the day. But my grandmother had a dual ritual that she would practice before we would get off and get going for the day. She'd do 2 things. One, she would take her bottle of olive oil and she'd twist off that bottle top and she'd dip that bottle into one finger and take the residue oil and she'd build a cross on our forehead. Right? It was her way of sending us out into the day with an anointing, that no bad, no harm would come our way, right? That we would be protected in our going and in our coming. And then before we would cross the threshold of the door, she said, boy, go to school. Mind your teachers. Get your lesson. And one day bring that education home. She said, bring it home for your little brother and your little sister who don't know what it is yet. Bring it home. Bring it home for that little boy down the street that you play with. God knows where he gonna end up. She was right. His name was Tyrone, and he was in his foolishness. Bring it home. She said, bring it home for your mama and your daddy who get up every day to go out and slave on somebody else's job in order to keep a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food on the table. Bring it home. Now, I didn't know all the way what my grandmother was communicating then, but I would come to learn that what she was saying was, it ain't just about me. It's about all of us. If I went far in life, we were all going to go far in life. If I did good, we were all going to do good. And quite frankly, I think that's the story of our party, of who we are as a people, that we believe that in order for me to rise, you don't have to fall. And I believe that the story, the future of this state, the hope of this state, is rooted in whether or not we're able to bring all of us up. Not some of us, not the well-heeled and the well-connected. But those kids, if our kids get educated here, in my neighborhood and in your neighborhood, it makes it safer for all of us. If people get paid a wage where they can take care of themselves and their family, they don't just do good, the economy does good, we all do good. If folks get access to life-saving health care where they can maintenance their care and not just through an emergency room, they don't just do good, we all do good. The system does good when they do good. And so this belief that we got to shred each other, this destruction and division, we can't rise, not as a community and certainly not as a state. I firmly believe that Florida's best days are ahead of her. But it does require a governor who has a North Star for where we want to go. And I want you to know that if you give me the opportunity to be the Democratic nominee for governor, and I get elected in November, as I believe we will, know that every single day you will have a governor who wakes up with folks, with people of this state on his mind. Who's committed to trying to make it better than I found it. Who's committed to working on behalf of those people who were my contributor at $5, no dollar, or $500, right? Because the governor of this state's got to be the governor for everybody. And God knows I want to be your governor. And if you give me the opportunity, we're going to bring it home for all of us. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to take questions. Honestly, I'm happy to take questions from anybody who has them. Thank y'all very much. There are a lot of... Thank y'all very much. I appreciate the opportunity. There are a lot of issues I know that are out there, and it's hard to hit them all. But I needed to come from behind that podium, and I needed to let you know my heart and the fact that I feel deeply about this state and where we're going. So I'm looking forward to the Q&A.
Okay, first question is, what is your position on reinstating tenure for Florida teachers?
I think it's a requirement. I think we should be, that there is some value in rewarding teachers for their time and service. I also believe in evaluations going both ways. I think we got to make sure that the folks that are in our classroom and largely tenure impacts our higher education levels, since it doesn't get as recognized within our K-12 system. But there's value. I mean, some of my best teachers were the ones that were in the classroom for 15, 10, 20 years. And that's not to say anything about the newer ones, because they're also passionate. But my older teachers had a way of breaking through because they had seen it all. And there's a value to that if we're truly committed to educating all of our children. Y'all got a lot of questions, so I'm going to go real quick.
You mentioned that you're in favor of a livable wage.
I am.
How does that translate into dollars?
Yeah, so it also depends on where you are in this state. So in our community, the city of Tallahassee, we've set a livable wage for all of our employees, which is around $12.80. But I'm also smart enough to know that in Miami, that may not cut mustard. And I realize that in Miami, if the wage is $15, that in Wakulla County, that may be living on the hog. You know, I don't know if that's true. It may not be true for Wakulla. I'm just using a couple of examples. But there is a way of finding out the livable wage for every community in every county around the state.
Got a question from 8-year-old Justin. He says he's 8 years old and many kids have been protesting. He wants to know, when you were young, did you protest something? And if so, what was it?
I love it. Where's Justin? Where are you? And stand up, man. How are you? Good. There are give Justin a hand. I appreciate that. So this will be wholly unimpressive for the adults in the room, but my first act of political organizing was sending a petition around my school in the 3rd grade trying to get the tortilla chips and the vending machines replaced by nacho cheese Doritos. It's only natural. It's only natural. Tortilla chips ain't got no cheese on it. And nacho cheese, they were great. I love some nacho cheese. Unfortunately, we didn't win. The school president, the principal said that it surpassed some nutritional guidelines, and it didn't happen. But that was honestly the most thoughtless thing in the world, but it meant something to me at the time. So my first organizing experience was a petition. But the young people that we see today, and I'm thinking specifically about the voices that we heard during the March for Our Lives, and I would include the Parkland students in that, but I would also include the kids from Chicago and from the DC public school system, and the young voices that we heard from all around the country who are dealing with the epidemic of gun violence, which is ripping their neighborhoods and communities apart every night of the week. Their lives matter also. And it was important to hear that integrated and weaved into this conversation around how we keep communities and kids safe. I'm also really inspired by the young voices that are speaking up today, because they're doing something on gun reform that we haven't been able to do in this state in a generation. And so the best thing that many of us can do is move out of the way and let them take the lead, right? Have their backs, but man, they're well on the way. Now, we still got a ways to go, but these young voices are piercing the electorate in a way that I think the adults haven't been able to for a long time, and I think that's powerful. And I want you to be encouraged and to stay at it, right? You got opinions, you got beliefs, and you ought to be able to speak up for those and in favor of those. And don't let anybody tell you that you're too young to do it, except your mama. If your mama say don't say it, you got to pay attention. But in all honesty, man, I wish you the very best. I wish you well. Our future mayor, our future governor. Yes, sir.
All right. It says, when you become governor, what will be the first priority on your agenda?
I received that, and I do believe we're going to become governor. And I think the first thing that we've got to do is make sure that we appoint the next 3 Supreme Court justices who are all going to be retiring